Sorry, Sally Quinn.
So my housekeeper asked me today, of all days, she said, "What are all those elephants statues you have all over the house?" And I said, "Well, those are my Ganeshas." And the Ganesh is the mascot of On Faith, which is my website. And Ganesh is the remover of all obstacles. And Ganesh also is the god of prosperity. It's a Hindu god. Right now, I'm wearing two Ganeshas, which I always wear. I only take them off when I go to bed. I have a Ganesh here, and then I have a little tiny Ganesh here. I'm always wearing these. I have two evil eyes. There's one in here, and then as my evil eye bracelet, which I never take off. I sleep in it and swim in it and bathe in it. Then I have my buffalo nickel. My father was in the Army, and he gave his regiment the buffaloes, they were called. Everybody got a nickel, and I wear that for good luck. I have a shell for the walk on the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, which when the pilgrims would stop by a house that was welcoming, they would put a shell out in front of it. And then I have my labyrinth here, which I walk, and my mother's wedding ring and my wedding rings. And I go nowhere without them. They are constantly with me. So am I superstitious? Of course. Am I spiritual? I think so. Am I religious? I don't know. I don't know what those words mean, and it makes a lot of religious scholars and theologians crazy when people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. It's the one thing that drives them nuts. And I don't understand why, because it seems to me that one, spirituality is a search for meaning, where another is really a belief in doctrines. And to this day, I don't understand why people get upset at what others do or don't believe. It just doesn't make any sense to me. My favorite bumper sticker in the entire world is, I don't know, and you don't either. And actually, I wrote this on Faith, and the guy who invented the bumper sticker read it and sent me one. I've got it in my office. But everyone has some superstitions, as Matt has said. Christopher Hitchens, for instance, told me once that if he finds a penny, he considers that good luck and will always pick it up and put it in his pocket. And Richard Dawkins told me that he won't step on a crack because it might break his mother's back, and that he would never, ever sleep in a haunted house because he'd be way too scared. So my religious upbringing was rather odd. My family came from Statesboro, Georgia, which is a tiny southern town near Savannah, and they were Scottish Presbyterians. My Aunt Ruth played the piano in the Presbyterian church. The help, many of whom were former slaves, went to the Baptist church, their Baptist church. However, what we really believed in and practiced was voodoo, psychic phenomena, Scottish mysticism, palm reading, astrology, seances, and ghosts. And I have many, many stories about those, real stories. And those things were my true religion, aside from dancing. Aunt Ruth was psychic, my Aunt Maggie was psychic, and I'm psychic. And so we actually put hexes on people, and they really worked. It was actually scary, and I finally stopped when my brother, who has a PhD in religion from the University of Chicago and is a theosophist and also a practicing Buddhist, told me I had to cut it out because it would come back at me 3 times. And so anything that I did later that was troublesome, I kept thinking, I brought this on myself. I should never have put a hex on her. So you asked me, do I believe all of this? And the answer is yes, I do. It was so ingrained in me as a child that I don't think it'll ever go away. Religion, on the other hand, is different. My father was in the Army, and he liberated Dachau, the German concentration camp. And he had his staff photographer take pictures of the bodies and the emaciated people. And he made scrapbooks out of them. And when I saw the scrapbooks when I was about 5 or 6, and I had always prayed every night. You know, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. When I saw those photographs, I realized that there could be no God, and I became an atheist, although I didn't know the word until I was 13. But I've been an atheist most of my life. And, you know, actually, as Matt said, I was an angry atheist. And then I started on faith, sort of by accident. I sort of backed into it. And I began to study religion, and I saw some of the good that was done in the name of religion. And I also met many wonderful, brilliant people who were religious and were theologians and scholars. And that changed my mind about many things. And I did stop calling myself an atheist, partly because John Meacham, who was the editor of Newsweek and who is a very religious person, told me, you know, you're not an atheist because you're not a negative person. And that's a way to define yourself negatively. And he also said, you can't talk about this until you know what you're talking about, and you've got to go out and read something. So I did. So I read a lot, it was fascinating, and I learned a lot, and I began to see the positive aspects of religion. However, in my 6 years as running on faith, nobody, of all the people I've interviewed, the people who've written it, the people I've talked to, nobody has ever been able to say, give me an acceptable answer of why there is suffering in the world. And that has always stopped me from being truly religious. I interviewed Rick Warren's wife about a month ago, and I was asking her about this very question, suffering in the world, and she teared up and she said, I don't know, sometimes I think it's all just a great big cosmic joke. And I thought that was really interesting. Oh gosh, 1 minute. So what gives my life meaning? I'd like to say being editor of On Faith, but I have to say that editing a website is about as spiritual as being on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. But really what gives meaning to my life is my husband, my son, his wife, my family, my husband's family, and my friends. And I find myself more and more staying at home and spending time with them since I've been doing the website in small groups rather than wanting to go to big flashy events, which I used to do. I love going to the country on weekends. My house is on the water. I read, I take walks in the woods, I swim. But most of the time I walk the labyrinth. I have a 50-foot labyrinth in the country. And I don't know whether you all know that. It's a circle where you walk. It's a meditational tool. And I concentrate on a question or something. I stand, I sit, I lie down in the center. Sometimes for hours I meditate. For hours. In fact, once I was lying down on the labyrinth and this little tiny plane kept circling over, and I knew that the guy thought I was dead. But what I get from the labyrinth is an enormous clarity. Just things seem better after I've walked the labyrinth. I feel renewed. I feel ready to take on the world. And I feel ready to put hexes on anyone who gets in my way.